Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Found out our former president, nothing more than a common criminal, evidently in the eyes of the law, as his legal team negotiated for his release. Going to be about $200,000 in bail to keep him out of jail. And he's a billionaire. He can easily, I'm sure, cough that up. But here's the thing: when you've got the leader of the Republican Party having to put up $200,000 in Fulton County to keep himself out of jail, he's going to be fingerprinted. He's going to be released and booked and all of that. This isn't good. And I know there's a lot of people. I was looking at social media today. Everyone's all celebrating, tingling in the panties, happy, all that stuff. It's not good. This is not good all the way around. This, in my view, this is bad. And no, a former president / common criminal is not a good thing for the nation. It's not. But Trump did this to himself. This is the sad reality of the moment we're in, and this is our system. And the thing is, I'm as I was driving home from Connecticut today, because over the weekend we spent, my youngest daughter and I spent the weekend up in Bridgeport, and got to see a fabulous concert and spend the weekend together. It's something that I do with the kids. But I was thinking about, January 20th of 2017 when I was coming back. And I was thinking about that day when what was ahead of us was uncertain, was going to be frightening in my view. And I remember at the time going, this is going to be bad. This will be the most corrupt administration in the history of the country. There was no, you didn't need to have a crystal ball to know that we were going to see some pretty nasty stuff. There was going to be some criming. There was going to be some shenanigans. There's going to be lots of Twitter. We knew all of the basics. We knew it was going to be bad. My hope at the time, and for those who remember tuning in, was saying, look, if he goes the way that I hope he goes, manufacturing, infrastructure, the things that got him to, at least to the heart and soul of my family, who had never voted, who were always the basket of deplorables, but they voted for him because he told them they were bringing those jobs back. They were bringing back that American dream. We're going to bring back those factories. Those towns are going to have their self-pride again. This was going to be great. And people bought it. Now, as where I went the other way, I said, look, this guy's a con man. He's always been a con man. He's always going to be a con man. It's always going to be about him, and it's going to be bad. People are going to go to jail. There are going to be horrible things that happen. And I've admitted this numerous times. I don't at all pretend to have predicted how bad. I said it was going to be bad. This is going to be unimaginably bad, but not this bad. I mean, you think about twice impeached. Had I said on January 17th or January 20th of 2017 that he was going to be impeached twice, no one would have believed it. If you would have said, eventually he's going to be found guilty of rape by a jury, no one would have believed that. No one would have believed that he would have not conceded his defeat. And in fact, not just not conceded, but doubled down, claim he won, and then put into motion a scheme to hold on to power by some twisted legal theories for some crackpot lawyers. And then when that failed, no, it gets worse. Had I said I predicted any of this, well, then have a big to do, have a bunch of people coming to the DC area with the intent of stopping the steal, riling them all up and pointing them at Congress and telling them, stop the steal. And then surprised that there was violence. And now here in the aftermath of all of that, 4 times indicted, saying that he seeks re-election for retribution. He's going after those. He's coming back. And he would still be the head of the Republican Party. Had I said any of that stuff on January 20th, 2017, every person would have laughed at me. But this is where we are. And this is what happened. And we all, like I said, knew it was going to be bad. We knew it was all going to be destructive for the country. We knew it was all going to tear at the fabric of who and what we are. And it has. And the one thing that it has successfully done, and this is what I said back then, what it has successfully done is it has made the wealth class richer. And that's what it was always it's what it's always what it's about. It's always about keeping working people at each other's throats. It's at slicing and dicing and pitting us against each other. So again, they can continue to rob us blind. And they've done it masterfully. You have to give credit where credit is due. And the credit to the wealth class of this country, who have given massive tax breaks and massively deregulated our economy so that they could take advantage of it, and ultimately us, and then have us blame each other for. I got to tell you, it's mastery. Now, it's not just Trump. Understand, Trump is not the reason all this has happened. In fact, Trump has kind of boogered things up, to be honest, like Trump does. I remember I had a friend who was one of the lawyers for the USFL Players Association. And he told the story about how Trump came into one of the negotiations and he just blew the whole thing up. They had been working for days to hammer out an agreement. He basically came in, blew it all up on the owner's side, and ended up getting the players much more than they possibly could have wanted. He screwed it up, and then ultimately screwed up the whole league. But that's what Trump does. It was all about him, nothing about the league. And it's the same thing with this country. It has nothing to do with you or me. It has nothing to do with making this a great country. It's about him. And it's always been that. So are we surprised that the news media is focused completely on the train wreck that is now our country over this one guy? Wednesday, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, there's going to be a debate. He has decided that he's not coming. And look, I wouldn't either. It's the child's table. Why would you go with Vivek Ramaswamy? Now the governor of Iowa is saying, "Hey, Trump's still got a campaign." No, he doesn't. Not when you have a cult status. Not when all of the things that I laid out, all of the crimes, all of the indictments, all of the impeachments, all of the everything hasn't swayed the Republican Party away from him. He's their guy. It's ride or die. And for me, this thing on Wednesday in Wisconsin, I'm not even going to pay attention to. Because why? The Republican Party is going to have to go through this Trump era in order to find who they are. Now, there's some hope. There is some hope. And, as we've been talking about for quite some time, I think at some point working people get enough. I think enough of the voices that pop up that make people start to think a little bit differently and away from the cult of Trump, maybe that's a good thing. But we got to go through this. And while we're going through this, we're going to have to deal with a lot of characters. For instance, when the big debate happens on Wednesday with the children at the little kids table, evidently Don Jr. and Kimberly Guilfoyle are going to be the ones who are going to attend for Donald. And if that's not a joke, I don't know what is. But understand, the Republican Party seems to have lost its mind completely. I was reading a story over at The Atlantic, and one of the front runners in the child's table of the Republican primary, Vivek Ramaswamy, said, and this is how crazy things have gotten, and how much they're trying to move us away from, anything that's going to help. He said, "I think it is legitimate to say how many police, how many federal agents were on the planes that hit the Twin Towers." Yes, he is saying, I don't know, maybe there were police maybe there were federal agents on those Twin Towers. Maybe. He said, maybe the answer is zero. Maybe. It's possible it's zero for all I know, right? For all I know, it's possibly zero. I have no reason to think it was anything other than zero. I don't know. But you never know. It's this kind of craziness these aren't serious people. These aren't serious politicians. These aren't people who are trying to make lives better. These are people who are trying to get attention. And when our politics turned away from how do we make people's lives better to, hey, how do I get attention? This is when things have gone off the rails. And the sad reality is we have done this to ourselves. You and me, we the voting populace have done this. I was looking at this CBS YouGov poll that asked Trump supporters who they trust more. Do they trust their family and friends? Do they trust, conservative media figures like Tucker? Do they their religious leaders? Because, of course, the Republican Party hell-bent on faith and religion. Or do they believe Trump more often? And what was interesting is 71% of the people polled said they believed Trump. 63% believed friends and family. So they believe a guy that is a billionaire con man over their own families. 56% believed conservative talking heads, which I'm shocked it's that high. The one thing that caught my attention, because I understand, look, they're on the Trump cult. Of course they're going to believe Trump. They don't believe their own families. They don't believe everything they see in the media. I get that. Only 42% said they believed religious leaders over Trump. Wow. And this again is another one of these moments where you go, the fabric of this country is being torn apart. Whether you're a religious person or not, it was one of the places, one of the institutions that tried to keep people on the straight and narrow, tried to keep them, good, decent, honest, however you want to frame that, being torn apart. And again, Trump isn't the cause for this. He's what's accelerated it. He's what's made it go boom. The question is what are we going to do about it? How do we rebuild that American dream? How do we rebuild a future for ourselves and for our children and our grandchildren like our grandparents did? To where we believe that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead. How do we rebuild that? I keep saying it comes down to smart policy, sound investment. Something I think Joe Biden is doing very well. And when we come back and to talk about my trip back from Connecticut, wow, I got to share some thoughts. But I want to hear your thoughts as well. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So over the weekend, my youngest daughter and I went up to Bridgeport, Connecticut to spend the weekend together, see a concert, spend some time, roaming around, exploring the city. Bridgeport, a beautiful place. Showed up for the jazz festival they had over the weekend, a wonderful opportunity for community, for people to come together. It was fabulous. And we had a great weekend in Connecticut. And good, again, Connecticut's one of those states where the haves versus the have-nots. It's one of the more unequal states in the country. And for me, I spent a lot of time thinking about how do we rebuild that prosperous working class? How do we make that opportunity there again? And the thing is as we were heading to and from, we ended up going over the replacement of the Tappan Zee Bridge, which is now the Mario Cuomo Bridge, which I prefer the Tappan Zee, to be honest. But it's a beautiful structure, done with all union labor under a project labor agreement with Davis-Bacon, protections in place, created good jobs, money but more importantly, done on time, under budget, and done. That's the other part, done. Unlike that monstrosity out in California that wasn't done with a PLA, with the Davis-Bacon protections, which is probably never going to be finished. But it got me thinking about as I was driving both ways. And, oh, by the way, Joe Biden, I'm ticked at you. The traffic was, oh my gosh, because there were little cones all over the place. Now, again, long-term thinking, great stuff. We're investing in infrastructure. We're rebuilding the roads because the roads in that area not great, but lots of construction going on. Made my commute a little more troubling. But here's the thing. This infrastructure boom is creating really good jobs. And some of the media reports out of this is, today, for instance, Biden announced another $667 million in new grants and loans to go into rural broadband. This should make rural communities thrilled by the fact that we're actually, moving into the 21st century. And they're saying, look, the reality is where we are. We need more workers. We need more people who are going to be able to do the jobs that are going to build this infrastructure, this incredible infrastructure. And I kept thinking about all those people I saw, doing the work, the wages I know that they're earning, the benefits I know that they're getting, and it being, I hope, the start of rebuilding a prosperous working class. I keep talking about the reality that we need those good paying, family sustaining jobs, the kind that my grandparents' generation enjoyed and fought for. Not enjoyed, fought for, demanded, and something we should be doing again. But there was tons of it. Now, I did on the way back drive past Bedminster. Because today, if you remember, and I got to throw this out there, today was supposed to be the conclusive report proving Trump's innocence. And I drove past the golf club there in Bedminster, and no one was home. But like I said, lots of construction traffic, no conclusive report. Let's quick go to the phones. I've got Dan from Chicago on line one. Dan, how are you?
Hey, Rick, how's it going?
I'm good. What's on your mind, brother?
Doing well. I want to just compliment what you were saying about how Joe Biden has probably been one of the more effective presidents in terms of getting blue-collar jobs back to individuals and also building things made in America, which is exactly what all of the Republicans have been asking for, yet we still hate him for doing those things, apparently. But I did want to talk about, Joan was talking about today that, whether or not Donald Trump is in prison or not, or if he suffers some type of a medical issue. And maybe Joe Biden does not want to run at this point because he thinks that he's the only one that could beat Donald Trump at this point. J.B. Pritzker is a name that keeps popping up among individuals. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I think he would be a good choice. I've said before, my choice would be I like Gretchen Whitmer. I like her a lot.
I love her.
I like her. I can see a future Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro ticket. One of my favorite people politically on the planet is Sherrod Brown. I would love to see that. There are a lot of great names out there. J.B. Pritzker being one of them. I think as a governor, he's done a pretty good job for you guys in Illinois.
I think he's been really good, and he can actually self-fund for most of it, which is probably half the battle.
I got to tell you, that's not a driver for me. I don't want to find hope in billionaires.
No, I agree with you completely, but that seems to be the trend these days. I feel that we need to reform our election laws, and people shouldn't be able to self-fund their own election campaigns. But that seems to be, thanks to the Supreme Court, the way that things are working these days.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I don't care if Joe Biden runs or not. I love Joe Biden, but it's his policies I want. I want what he's been doing to continue.
Exactly.
The end of neoliberalism, I've been calling for a couple of decades now. Finally, we're moving. We're not there yet, but we're moving in that direction. And for me, that's hugely exciting.
I think he's been pretty effective. I didn't vote for him in the primary, but I fell in line and voted for him in the general. And he's been one of the most effective presidents that I've seen. I'm only 36, but still, he knows how to get things done.
I'm 20 years older than you, and he was my fourth choice. But everything that he's been doing is stuff I've been calling for all that time. So for me, I'm glad to see it happening.
Yeah. Well, listen, Rick, I love your show. I have a show on WCPT Sunday mornings from 8 to 9 a.m. It's called Apollatini.
All right.
And if any of your listeners want to tune in, they are more than welcome to.
There you go. Appreciate it, Dan.
Yeah, but thanks. I love your show. It's great. I listen to it every night.
Thanks so much. Good stuff, Dan. No, but here's the thing, and this is where the important part, what Dan brought up here. It's the policies for me. I don't get into cult of personality. I've never been into hero worship. I've never said, hey, this person is going to save us. And this is what Trump brought us. I alone can do it. And no, you alone can't do it. What you've done is you've caused massive, massive chaos. And we need to be answering some of the questions that are going to help us move in a direction that's going to make lives better. And one of the things that I've said is, what Biden has done, I think, really well is go after some of those policies that allowed manufacturing to leave, start talking about an industrial policy, start talking about, how are we going to provide a future for our kids? And the fact that he's all in on the union front, and that's how we're going to we're going to rebuild the working class. For me, that's great stuff. Let's quick go to the phones. Got Joe on two. Joe, how are you?
I'm good, Rick. How are you?
I'm great. What's on your mind, brother?
Hey, I live in Chicago. I'm a union electrician. Been an electrician for over 30 years. But, you talk a lot about, the wages and all that. And I think it's deeper than that because we all like to go to the diners. And how is a diner supposed to pay somebody living wages when living wages is gone? I mean, isn't it gone?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. This what I keep saying, Joe, and you're I hope you're gonna back me up on this. By paying good wages to our construction workers, that money goes into those diners and reverberates through the local economy and is churned through and helps build up by us using our tax dollars to build these projects and pay good wages doing it. It helps all of the community. That's my view. What do you see?
Well, I just see, I make good money. I can't complain, right? I'm a union electrician in Chicago. I can't complain. Chicago is a great city. It's very livable. I actually live in the city, but I go to these diners and I see these waitresses, and I like to go to the ones with cash only and stuff like that. But I always look and go, how do these women, because it's mostly women that are serving. How do they, if they don't have a husband, it's how are they surviving? Because rent, my son lives a couple of blocks away from us, and he's got a two-flat. He rents it out for almost $2,000, an apartment for almost $2,000 a month.
That's crazy.
How does somebody afford that?
No, I'm right there with you. In fact, my next guest is going to answer some of those questions. We're going to talk about some of that in the next segment. I got to take a quick break here, Joe, but I appreciate the call, brother. I hope you'll call back again soon. But when we come back, you may remember I was talking about a video of this Jessica McCabe from Alabama, the mother of 2 adult children who, she said exactly what Joe said. How do you afford to live? How do you afford to rent an apartment when the prices are just completely outrageous? In fact, the video went completely viral, some 12, 13 gazillion views. We're going to have her up next to share some thoughts on her video and what inspired it, why, and all of that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. I'm the talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day National Guard troops in Minneapolis raided Teamsters Local 574 headquarters. Over 150 were arrested, including top strike leaders Bill Brown and the Dunn brothers, who were imprisoned in military stockades. Troops also seized union records and files. They then raided the Central Labor Union, enforcing out dozens of area labor leaders. The Teamsters had been battling the trucking bosses and the Citizens Alliance throughout the spring and summer in what would be a turning point for industrial organizing. Finally, drivers agreed to a tentative settlement, but the bosses rejected any deal, refusing to negotiate with Reds. Farmer Labor Party Governor Floyd Olson declared martial law the next day. 4,000 troops arrived, issuing unlimited military permits to scab drivers. By month's end, over 7,500 scab trucks were rolling throughout the city. Local 574 challenged the martial law, demanding that peaceful picketing and open-air meetings be reinstated. They also wanted troops withdrawn from the city, and they wanted all truck movement halted for 48 hours. When Olson rejected these demands, a mass rally was called for the 31st to mobilize strike support. 25,000 turned out to the parade grounds cheering strike leader Bill Brown, who declared, quote, "The Farmer Labor Party is the best strike-breaking force our union has ever gone up against." Historian Brian Palmer notes the loudest and longest applause was reserved for Albert Goldman, who thundered, quote, "If we submit without a struggle, then we deserve the fate of submissive slaves. We cannot, we dare not submit. We call upon the workers, organized and unorganized, to clench their fists, shout defiance of the bosses, and struggle until victory or death."
Today's train robbers don't need guns, for they are railroad executives wearing $3,000 suits and robbing us by railroading the political system. With their gangs of lobbyists and hopper cars of campaign cash, they get Congress to do their dirty work, gutting public safety protections and muting railway unions. Thus, rich investors get richer, while regular people are hit by an astonishing level of derailments, injuries, destruction, and death. Witness the horrific wreck of Norfolk Southern's nearly 2-mile-long toxic freight train this year in East Palestine, Ohio. This was a product of the industry's prevailing ethic of profit over public safety, and the American people were outraged by the greed, demanding fundamental reform. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg weighed in, correctly noting that calls to protect the public have too often, quote, "given way to industry pushback and inaction. That must not happen this time," he emphatically declared. You go, Pete. But it is happening. A key reform he pushed was to allow rail employees to report safety dangers without fear of retribution from the corporate hierarchy. Such a close call reporting program has existed for years, but participation was voluntary. Hello. Out of some 800 American railroad corporations, just 27 chose to volunteer, and all of the big 8 freight giants, including Norfolk Southern, refused to join. In the media glare of the East Palestine catastrophe, however, nearly all pledged to support the employee reporting reform. But that was then. Today, the media focus on East Palestine is gone, and the railroad lobbyists and their hopper cars of corporate cash have rolled back into Washington, watering down Buttigieg's safety agreement to nothing. This is Jim Hightower saying, and that's why America's train system won't run right until we fix the crooked political money system that derails progress.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about a video that a woman from Alabama made about her 2 adult children, just trying to start their lives and how difficult it has been for them. And you may remember I was not overly kind, because I did ask the question, when did this pop up? When did you realize that it's not 1985 anymore? And look, I said, look, this is great. The party that figures out who to address her concerns is going to get her loyalty and millions of other voters across the country as well, because for far too long, the wants, needs, and hopes and dreams of the working class have been left way off the table. And so we reached out to Jessica McCabe and said, hey, would you like to come on the show and talk with us? And, well, lo and behold, she said yes, and she's here to share some thoughts with us. Jessica, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
So this video, you great stuff, as I talked about before, pointing out the realities of where we are. When did you realize that things aren't great? When did you have this moment of clarity that it's not 1985 anymore?
I think for me, and it's not an excuse by far, any way, shape, or form, but I was in the military for 22 years. So I didn't really have to deal with rent. I had base housing. I didn't have to deal with the cost of health insurance because I had military health care. So I joined the military at 19. I was on my own since I was 16 because I could. Even my wage was only $4.85. I was able to live on my own at 16 years old. So I just didn't see it until my kids aged out of my health insurance, which was through the military, and then they started to try to get out on their own. And there was even times when I was overseas. I didn't see what was going on in America. I didn't have to worry about the inflation here because I wasn't here. We were in Japan, I was in Korea. So I was all over the place. And all I knew is that I got a paycheck the 1st and the 15th of every month. I always had a roof over my head with my kids, and we didn't have to worry about medical insurance. So not until they aged out and I retired from the military did I see the world as it was.
So it's when it directly affected you.
Correct.
Because one of the questions I didn't realize, and thanks for your service, I didn't realize you were a military, lifelong military person. So that explains a lot of being in kind of a bubble, as you pointed out. But you brought up the word inflation, and I'm hearing a lot of that. Everyone's saying, well, it's the inflation. Well, inflation is part of it. The bigger part for me has always been the fact that if you look at CEO compensation to worker compensation from 1978 to today, their wages have gone up 1,000%. Ours have gone up 12%. So the fact that prices are going up, wages unfortunately haven't, because these big corporations, these CEOs, and of course our politicians have done a hell of a job holding wages down.
Oh, well, we have not increased the federal minimum wage since 2009. And it's not because the people didn't want it. It's because it would always go to Congress, and Republicans and Democrats would always stall it in the House. And why? Because the people who they're actually working for, in my opinion, are their benefactors, which are the donors. So if you raise the minimum wage, then you lower CEO bonuses and profit margins. So it didn't benefit them, the people who are actually paying for them to be in office, to do so. And now they're saying that if they raised it, that it would put us into a lot of inflation. Well, you're right. If you raised it right now from the 725 to what it should be accounting for inflation, it would kill our economy. But if you had been doing it in increments every time the inflation went up, it wouldn't be such hard hitting as it is today.
So now when you say something like this, obviously you've gotten, because of the viral video, you've gotten a lot of people, probably on both sides of the extremes, attacking you or praising you.
Correct.
What are they saying to you?
Well, I have obviously some millennials and Gen Z saying, thank God somebody in your generation finally gets it. We're out here struggling, and it's not 1985 anymore. But on the flip side, although I do have some Generation X and boomers that are agreeing as well, the biggest pushback that I'm having is from the boomers and Gen Xers saying, well, they just need to work harder or get a better job. And, we did this and I did it. They should be able to do it. Well, you're correct. If we were still in the same economy as 1985, we're not there anymore.
Yeah, no, and look, I go back to the 1985 era. I'm a union guy. Union density in this country was over 20%, close to 25%. Mm-hmm. It's down to, in the private sector, 6.6%, which means the ability for people to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions has been diminished over the last 25, 30 years in incredible ways. So that view of, I'll just go across the street and get a different job, a better paying job, isn't there because, well, reality is they are colluding and holding wages down on purpose.
Well, and I think more and more of this generation, the millennials and Gen Zs, they don't feel a need to stay with a company long like we did. We're like, oh, if we stay there for 20 years, we're going to get a pension. There's going to be something at the end of the tunnel. And it's because we felt like the company was committed to us and we were committed to them. And I don't think that's the case anymore. They'll just as soon as let you go in 5 seconds if they feel like their profit margins are going down. They don't care about the family unit or even the middle class as it is. And it's just, I don't see my kids being able to retire like when I did. I don't see a retirement in their future at all if something doesn't change.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But don't you think that a lot of that generation, both the millennials and especially Gen Z, are looking at the treatment that corporate America gave their parents and the screw job that Gen X has taken over these years? And we don't talk about that at all. We've been suffering in silence as downsizing and outsourcing and consolidation have destroyed what was that thing that was able for us to build up. But fortunately, we still had it. Now the kids don't even have the beginnings of that.
No, and honestly, it's not going to get better with the outsourcing. Just look at Walmart. Just walking into Walmart, they've gotten rid of half the cashiers, which was jobs, to be, now we're bagging our own groceries and saying, thank you for letting me do it. So it's everywhere you look, in McDonald's, right? They're just getting rid of the middle class. Like they're going to find some other way to have it work for them and have more profits. And the middle class are stuck going, what do I do now?
Yeah.
That's why you have so many social media influencers right now, because that's what corporations are paying for. It's the quick buck. But what is that going to do for them in the long run? They're not going to have a 401k being an influencer. Once they're no longer popular, they no longer have a job. So they're going to these unsustainable jobs because companies don't care about them anymore.
Yeah, but you talk about 401k. I'm still hoping we go back to defined benefits, to where people work 40 years, get a gold watch and a pension that lasts their lifetime. And again, that's the difference in thinking between someone in Gen X. I'm a early Gen X, and the next generations. They don't even know what a defined benefit pension is. They've been gone for so long because corporate America has so badly screwed the working class of this country over.
Oh, I definitely agree. And if we're going to do anything, I mean, I think what we forget as a people is that the big corporations and the elitists are trying to pin us together, and they're doing a very good job, because instead of fighting with the people that we should be fighting with, we are fighting amongst ourselves. We are finding everything to be divisive about Republican, Democrat. And I'm like, do you really think either party is really pushing for the people? I mean, this is a Democratic and Republican problem, because it's a people problem. So why are we not saying, hey, let's all band together and look at them and demand that you start representing us and stop representing the big corporations that are paying for your campaign? And I think if we put some things into place that maybe put some things to where certain people couldn't vote, to me, it's a conflict of interest. If a big corporation gives you millions of dollars to put you in power, who are you working for?
Yeah.
Are you working for me, the people, or are you working for that person that gave you millions of dollars to get in that position?
So you'd have a problem with, say something like Clarence Thomas making a decision on the Supreme Court, when billionaires have paid for his vacations.
Correct. Like, that's a conflict of interest. So why are we still allowing to do that in the United States? Term limits. We've wanted term limits since 1995. And 23 states tried to enact term limits. And then a senator from Arkansas says, oh, no, because then that would mean that I'm not getting my kickbacks. He fought it. Then they ended up taking it to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says that only the Constitution can change term limits.
Yeah.
Who has to approve an amendment to the Constitution?
The people.
So like, why aren't we doing something?
See, but I'm actually not in favor of term limits, because I think we have the ultimate term limiter. We as educated, informed, active, engaged voters can go to the polls and throw these bums out anytime we want. The sad reality is, and you hit on it a second ago, we're so well sliced and diced and pitted against each other that we're not even talking about issues anymore. We're stuck in the red hat, blue hat category. Where we've now defined ourselves by who we voted for and which color shirt we're wearing, instead of what policies we need to make our lives and our kids' lives better. And that's how they've gotten us. And they've gotten us good. I mean, to be honest, the massive wealth redistribution that's happened in this country, from the working poor and the working class to our hyper wealthy at the top, is mind-blowingly incredible.
Oh, and it's there. I mean, it's like they're doing it right in front of our face, and we see it, but we're too blind to see it, either because A, we don't want to believe that this is actually happening to the America that we grew up in, or we don't know what to do about it, so we're just going to be blissfully ignorant about what's going on. And I look at some of those things today, and like you said, I made a video the other day that people now are being judged by their political affiliation instead of their character. And I will always judge people by their character, but we can no longer do that. Back in the 80s, nobody talked about who you voted for. There could be people within the same family that were Democrat and Republican, and you judge somebody on their character, how they treated you, how they treated people in their communities. But now it's like, I'm not going to help you if you don't believe exactly everything that I believe in. It's either you're with me or against me, instead of saying we are all in this together. So why aren't we helping each other out? Because we are stronger together.
Let me ask you this, because I made a comment a little bit earlier, and I said, look, the sad reality is we've got people who get into politics because they want attention, not so much they want to help people. I mean, I look at the Republican Party right now, and I'm going to be quite open and honest about it. I say they hate working people. Just look at the things that they do. Look at the policies that they've put into place over the last 40 years. Look at the destruction of program after program. And we could debate that forever, but I don't see any policy initiatives coming from that side of the aisle to do what you said, raise the minimum wage, to make sure that people get health care, to address housing concerns, because all of this stuff we can, with smart policy and sound investment, address as our grandparents' generation did.
Oh, most definitely. And I think that that's what we're missing. I mean, right there, when's the last time a common American decided just to go and read a bill? Like read the 82 pages of a bill. We don't. You know what we read? We read the headline. And they put the headline as what we want to hear. So it'd be like, oh, we're going to get rid of student debt loans. So we're going to put that as a headline. But what you don't realize in that bill, they've patted each other's backs and said, okay, we're going to put this bill, but we're also going to add this into it. And we don't see it. So we're like, yes, we want you to vote for that bill. We do. And then other things that we didn't read are actually going to affect our future. So how are they have so much power to just add things into a bill that none of us see?
Corporate lobbyists.
Yes.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Jessica McCabe. You can check her out on Twitter. I mean, on TikTok, right? You got like a huge TikTok following. Like,
yes, it's on TikTok.
Like almost 1 million people, right?
I think it's 780,000.
Good for you. Because look, we need more people who are gonna have the kind of voice that you've got on this. So let me ask you, how do we address this? I mean, you ask questions about housing. You said, why is it that housing costs $2,000 a month for an apartment? Why do you think that is?
Well, why are we letting foreign governments buy land in America that don't even live here? It's like they're parking their money here in the United States. Why are we letting big corporations buy out a lot of the inventory and then putting it directly for rent? So it's like they're saying, you will never own anything, you will rent, and you will pay our mortgages so that we can sell it later, and you'll be happy about it. So unfortunately, when these big companies come in and buy houses and raise the rent, the regular person that bought an investment property, which there's no wrong way to buy an investment property, they're going, wait, well, if this is going for $2,000, I can also sell it for $2,000 because I need it because this inflation's killing me. So they rise up the rent, meaning the big corporations, and make the other people who are just doing investment properties, blue collar, that just want to make a little extra money, they do the same thing.
See, I got to tell you, I was expecting a different answer. I got to tell you, Jessica, I thought we were going to argue. I thought we were going to disagree on a lot of stuff. But, this is the thing about Gen Xers. We find common ground. So how do we get the rest of Gen X to realize that it was our generation who led the slide downward? We grew up in the era of greed is good, the one with the most toys when he dies wins, when that hooray for me mentality. How do we come back to the idea that smart policy, sound investment is the way forward? We can address all of our problems if we figure out how to come off the sidewalks yelling at each other and come back to the streets.
Like I told my kids, the way I really found out was I lived like my kids. So I actually went out with them, looked at apartments. I actually looked at their budget with them, and they showed me all these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it like really opened up my eyes. And I felt guilty for going on a vacation, because me and my husband could afford it. And here's my daughter working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, 8 months pregnant, just to try to put food on the table. And I'm like, holy, so when you start seeing that, and you have to have empathy, us as Gen Xers are supposed to make, every generation is supposed to make the next generation better than the one we just came from. So when did we lose that lesson?
No, and I'm glad you brought that up because, I say all the time, we grew up believing, and I'm sure you'll agree, that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead. And
right.
that, this idea that it was our birthright almost, that each generation would do just a little bit better than the previous generation. And that seems to have stalled. And a lot of it comes back to the greed that we see in our corporate boardrooms, the bad policy that's been allowed to be put in place over the last 40 years. And I got to be honest, our ability to allow ourselves to be sliced and diced and pitted against each other.
Oh, I agree. And I think that we got used to being kind of spoiled, meaning if out of sight, out of mind. If we didn't see it, if it didn't affect us, if we were still able to go on our vacations, if we still had our 401ks, then we're like, okay, well, I'm fine. Everybody else should be fine. So if you don't see it, you don't realize there's a problem to change it. And I think that if we just have a little bit of empathy and start lifting up the next community, can you imagine how much stronger this world would be if we actually worked together and tried to make it a better place to be?
Oh. Heaven forbid. Can't have that because then no Jeff Bezos, no Elon Musk's.
Oh, no, you wouldn't.
No.
And it's literally turning into, like I said, the ultra wealthy and then everybody else. Everybody else outnumbers the ultra wealthy. So why aren't we doing something?
Yeah, again, I say this all the time. They've got all the money, but we've outprocreated them. If we would just come together on some simple ideas, maybe. But there was a guy back in 2004 ran on this platform of the Two Americas. You may remember him. John Edwards said, eventually we're going to end up in a place where you've got the haves and the have-nots. And sadly, it appears that we have made that that reality. But Jessica, last question I've got for you: how do we get people like you to run for something? How do we get people like just average, everyday working people to come out and go, you know what? We're going to go to Washington, or we're going to go to Montgomery, or we're going to go to Harrisburg, or we're going to go wherever, and we're going to make those 82-page laws. And what's going to say inside of them is we're going to help working people. We're going to help mothers so they don't have to work into their 8th month of being pregnant. We're going to help families get by so that they want to bring children into this world. How do we get you to run for something?
Well, I think nobody can do that alone. And I think that's the problem. When you go into government, you go in there with nice ideals, but then the greed monster kind of takes over and you become self-serving. So the only way to not be self-serving is to be with the people before. I mean, you have to be in the trenches with the people while you're making those rules.
Well, good stuff, Jessica. I appreciate you taking time for us. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks so much. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that workers' rights and women's rights activist and anarchist Emma Goldman gave a speech in New York City. Emma Goldman was born in what is today Lithuania. She came to New York in 1885, where she built a reputation as a powerful speaker. In New York, she addressed a crowd of between 3,000 and 4,000 unemployed workers in Union Square. The country was at the beginning of a depression that would sweep across the nation. Working families were finding it harder and harder to put food on the table. By the end of 1893, unemployment would soar to nearly 20%. Undercover agents at the rally reported that Emma had urged the crowd to take bread from the capitalists, quote, by force. Goldman recounted saying, quote, well then, demonstrate before the palaces of the rich, demand work. If they do not give you work, demand bread. If they deny you both, take bread. 10 days later, Emma was arrested in Philadelphia for her comments at the New York rally. She was sentenced to 1 year in prison. After she was released, Emma traveled to Vienna to study medicine. She returned to the United States to continue her lectures on workers and women's rights. She spoke out about the need for women to have access to contraception, an opinion that could arouse a backlash at the time. Emma was arrested multiple times for daring to speak out on controversial issues. In 1919, during the height of the Red Scare anti-communist hysteria, Emma Goldman was deported to the Soviet Union. Emma was a courageous defender of free speech, often called the most dangerous woman in America. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I gotta tell you, I really liked her. Again, we need more voices like that to step out of the darkness and say, look, life's tough. You know, the kids are struggling. It wasn't like this for us. And as Jessica said, look, I was making $4.35 an hour back then. Able to afford a place to live, a crummy car, was able to get by. And the reality is inflation has gone up, but consolidation has been a huge part of this. I remember my first apartment. I think I paid $135 a month for when I was in college. Granted, minimum wage was $3.35 an hour back then, but that isn't $1,200, $1,500 a month on a $7.25 minimum wage. And there were more diverse, more unionized jobs, more opportunities than there are currently. Everyone now wants gig employment. Everyone now, you're going to be your own boss. And this idea that, again, I think my generation, and I'm going to speak for the whole generation at this point, believed that if you work hard, you play by the rules, you're going to get ahead. That's just the equation. That was what was laid out in front of us. And that the harder you worked, the meritocracy idea, the harder you worked, the better off you were going to be. We believed that. We internalized it. And you talk to people of our generation, and it comes out in all of the rhetoric. That has changed, and has changed in enormous ways. Now, again, I got a couple of emails from folks, and too many to go through at this moment, but some of it going, well, again, the divisive stuff. Well, it was great for white men, but not for women or minorities, or I got all that, and I agree. Question is how do we take all of this stuff that has been dividing us for so long? How do we take all of this stuff, learn from it, and move forward? Because here's the weird thing. This is the spot that I've been in for a while. I don't know how you get past the divisive stuff. I don't know how you get past the hard barriers that people throw up. Well, this is my issue. How do you get past that? I brought up the song about the guy that sang the song last week. That evidently is all over the country music charts. I asked the question of, when you hear that song, where do you put yourself? Because the responses I got from people, well, he's being racist, or he's being this, or he's being that. And I hear a guy who's saying, look, life's tough. Wages are crummy. I'm struggling, working my behind off, not getting ahead. And there's a point at which people go, well, what's the point of working if you're not going to get ahead? What's the point of my struggles and my labor and my, the ache of my back and the sweat of my brow, not being able to keep a roof over my head? It was about, I guess it's been about 15 years now, where we had done a food drive. The idea was we're going to help the food bank and the homeless shelter. So we did a Hungry and Homeless for the Holiday food drive. And I guess it just shows to my privilege that I didn't realize that people who were in the homeless shelters actually held full-time jobs. I mean, it makes sense when you stop and you think about it, that, it's possible that people who work could be homeless, but I was surprised by the number of people in the homeless shelter who worked at all of our establishments that you didn't know that they were homeless. They came, they did their job, and then they went back to nowhere. And in what society is that sane or rational? And then you have people who are going to say, well, we can't possibly raise the minimum wage. What kind of a society do we want? And the reason that I reached out to Jessica is I'm like, look, I think what you said was spot on. Again, I was a little harsh, saying, well, congratulations, when did you figure this out? And I guess I shouldn't be surprised. But career military, as she said, never thought about any of that stuff. Housing, healthcare, retirement. The S word. It's kind of socialistic. But that doesn't trickle down to the workforce, because we used to have that. You spent 40 years working for an employer. They gave you a gold watch and a defined benefit pension. You had that. You had a little bit of your savings. You had Social Security. You got to live your life out with dignity in your home. Now we've destroyed the defined benefit pension. Republicans want to take away Social Security. And, well, your savings, it's been eaten away by corporate profits. What are we going to do? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
The numbers will increase, but they will not increase, we hope, to further catastrophic proportions. We just don't know yet.
Extent of heartbreaking losses becoming clearer in Maui fires. New evacuations as Canada's record wildfire season rages on. Plus,
instead of exporting American jobs, we're creating American jobs and exporting American products.
1 year later, the Inflation Reduction Act is turbocharging a U.S. clean energy boom.
All of those booms and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
This legislation they oppose or attack is now the greatest thing to come to their states. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene, the very quiet lady from Georgia. Well, she talked about what Biden's doing is what Roosevelt did, what Kennedy did. I thought, well, yeah.
Well, yeah. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, more grim news out of Hawaii today, but at least the bad news is slowing down a bit.
That's a good way of looking at it. As we go to air on Maui, Hawaii, the death toll has surpassed 110 and is still rising. Downed power lines are under new scrutiny as a potential ignition source. Amid massive mobilization of resources for search, recovery, and relief efforts, FEMA estimates it will take many years to rebuild the destroyed town of Lahaina at a cost upwards of $5.5 billion. Preliminary insurance industry estimates put total economic loss and damage from the fires as high as $10 billion. The Maui fires destroyed nearly 3,000 structures, the vast majority residential, worsening the pre-existing affordable housing crisis on the island. Survivors say they are already being approached by developers wanting to buy land where their homes once stood.
Many, of course, think of Hawaii as a paradise, but the fact is, over the past 20 or so years, according to AP, disasters like this, thanks in no small part to climate change, have sort of gone through the roof on Hawaii.
Canada is also still grappling with a record wildfire season intensified by extreme heat and dryness. The government of the Northwest Territories declared a state of emergency this week due to multiple out-of-control wildfires that completely obliterated the rural town of Enterprise and now threaten the territorial capital of Yellowknife. There's no relief from the unprecedented heat that is intensifying the fires in Canada. Parts of British Columbia broke new all-time high records this week for the month of August, topping 106 degrees. Portland, Oregon this week also set a new all-time high August temperature record of 108 degrees. That's about 25 degrees hotter than normal. The last time Portland, Oregon was this hot was during a 1 in 10,000 year heat wave that hit 2 years ago. As the pace of costly climate change intensified extreme weather disasters accelerates, climate solutions are also gaining speed.
Good.
1 year ago this week, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest single climate investment in U.S. history after a long and very difficult struggle. Experts say the Inflation Reduction Act has already been a game changer for the clean energy sector in America, but experts say it has also spurred other countries to boost their climate investments to compete.
So not only a game changer here in the U.S., but a game changer around the world.
Yes. However, a recent poll found most Americans are unaware of the law's profound impact. 70% say that they've heard little or nothing at all about the Inflation Reduction Act since it was signed into law. The IRA invests $370 billion over 10 years to accelerate renewable energy projects, increase domestic clean energy manufacturing and electric vehicle manufacturing, and boost electrification, including the first major incentives for homeowners to transition away from polluting fossil fuels. According to new analyses, the climate law has spurred a factory-building frenzy in the U.S., more than $110 billion in new private sector clean energy manufacturing plants, including the nation's first solar panel recycling plant. Nearly 200,000 new jobs in the clean energy sector alone. That has spurred others like the European Union and India to boost investment in their own domestic clean tech industries. President Biden, in a tour of a wind energy plant in Milwaukee, Wisconsin this week, noted that all congressional Republicans voted against the Inflation Reduction Act as he highlighted the surge in clean energy jobs and U.S. manufacturing.
We're investing in America. According to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, my plan is leading to a boom. They call it a boom in manufacturing. and manufacturing investment as you're seeing right here in this factory.
A building boom, a manufacturing boom, a jobs boom, a clean energy boom. Sounds like a good idea to me. For much more on all of these booms and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Mastodons, and site formerly known as Twitter at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So over the weekend, I came across a video from our good friend John Russell, who did a video for More Perfect Union and went to the Trump rally in Erie, Pennsylvania, and said, hey, I want to talk to some working people. And lo and behold, what I think he found and what we're going to ask him about is, as we've been saying on this show for years, a lot of the people who voted for Trump just wanted a job. They want a good family-sustaining job. Said it all the time. My family, otherwise known as the basket of deplorables, always racist, always homophobic, always misogynistic, always all that stuff. Never bothered to vote. Never. This guy got them out to vote. Why? Because he was going to bring back that standard of living that they lost. He was going to bring back that opportunity for their children. That opportunity to work hard, play by the rules, and get ahead, as we've been talking about. And here to share some thoughts on his experience there at the big rally, I've asked John Russell to come talk with us. He's the owner, editor of the Holler newsletter. You can find that at theholler.co. We'll get links out on social media how you can take it out. It's class politics for rednecks and hippies. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, you bet, Rick. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk again.
So walk me through what takes you to the big Trump rally? What motivates you to go and talk to Trump voters?
I grew up in the Ohio Valley, where a lot of those folks are headquartered. I mean, of course, they're all across the country, but the Ohio Valley is unique. The Ohio Valley was a headquarters of labor union politics. It used to be the place Democrats had to win in Ohio to win statewide. Now, my county where I live and bartend went for Trump by 71%. So I bartend there. I'm on the left, and I make no bones about it. I don't hide that when I'm in the bar, and, we have political conversations all the time, and they don't go how you would expect them to go if you're just watching cable news all the time. It's like you said at the top of the show. A lot of people, if you're clocking into work because you have to do that, you don't have the luxury of not working, you feel in your bones that the system is getting worse and worse and worse and harder to get ahead. And that's how a lot of people in my bar in a county that voted for Donald Trump feel. Had a lot of good conversations in that bar that I thought would be copied over at the rally. Turns out they were.
Now, I was not surprised because, look, I've done the exact same thing. In fact, we did a little over a month long tour back before the last election where we went through Iowa and Wisconsin and places that used to be places that had factories, had identities, and had it stripped away from them. And the conversations we had with people were much like you did. I want our identity back. I want our opportunities back. Was there anything that surprised you when you were talking to the people wearing the Trump paraphernalia? Anything that grabbed you, said, why are you wearing that outfit? If you believe that, anything like that?
There was a ton of stuff like that. Listen, I mean, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, right?
Of course not.
People, we talk about meeting folks where they are. All right. We are in a place in America where we've had 50 years of a billionaire funded right-wing megaphone that is whispering into the ears of millions of people, especially Trump voters are tuning in and they're hearing a lot of ways that they're supposed to feel about, other Americans, right? And when you go up there and you ask them, you uncork a bottle of the strongest opinions that are coming straight off of cable news. Once those run out and you say, hey, how's your health care? What's your job like? Are you getting into, are you getting out of work, everything that you're putting into it? You hear a lot of surprising stuff, especially for people wearing red hats. We heard that, the Cheneys took us into Iraq on a lie that Halliburton is evil big red, and how, we talked to a gas pad worker who was down in West Virginia working for Halliburton, said, I bring multi-millions of dollars of gas out of the ground every day. I get paid $13 an hour, and it's garbage. It didn't take long to find people in line. Keep in mind, this is one Trump rally, but didn't take long to talk to people in line and hear that politicians should be rejecting donations from billionaires, that we lost our Republican living in oligarchy, that BlackRock and Vanguard have, close to $20 trillion in assets, and that's way too much. All of these things we heard from people standing in line at a Trump rally, and to me, it just underscored that across the political spectrum, people know that if you're working class, you're getting screwed. They want to do something about it, and if there's a party that wants to organize them along, labor lines and make sure they stick together with other people despite their differences, you could get a long way doing that.
No, and this is what, I had a conversation a little earlier with a woman from Alabama saying, look, the party that figures out how to address her concerns, that her kids don't have the same opportunities she have, that their lives are going to be much more difficult than hers was, the party that figures out how to message that better and actually get something accomplished, they're going to be the ones that people are loyal to, much like FDR and the Democrats of the 30s and 40s. But we're in such, and you pointed it out, we're in such a polarized time where the media structure is controlled by massive wealth that it's almost impossible for that message to break through. Because look, I've been saying what we've been just talking about since the election in 2016. When everyone's saying, Trump's racist and he's all that. Of course he is. Of course they are. Of course those people are all racist, misogynist, and homophobic. They've always been. But that's not what motivated them. That was the canary in the coal mine going, hey, the working class is hurting. How about we do something?
Yeah, and the thing that stood out to me is that we really have for the past 50 years, we've been in this situation where the loudest voice in the room is billionaire-funded right-wing propaganda, right? Before that, when we really put up all the latest round of wins for workers, Social Security, Medicare, going back to through LBJ and back to FDR, that was built on a well of organized labor and people being organized in their workplace. And since then, it's just been a decline for unions. But I think two things are interesting here. One, the most positive response we got from talking to people in line was when they heard about how UPS workers, stood in hundreds of thousands of numbers strong, went up against one of the largest, most wealthy corporations in America, won themselves a contract worth $30 billion cash in hand. I mean, there it is, right there. That's a positive example. Everybody in line was down for that. And, to me, it showed that there is potential. There's appetite for a new labor movement. And I think, if that comes to pass and we do a lot of labor organizing, that's the kind of thing that might change the politics right now that we feel are really set in stone.
Yeah.
Those kind of politics sold in line.
Let me ask you this, John, because both of us are labor guys. I, for years, have been saying that labor has done a poor job of reaching out to people. In fact, when the Tea Party rose, I was telling the leadership of the unions in my area, you should be sending people to take over that movement. That is our voice. That is our movement. And they say, no, they're all a bunch of crackpots. They let it go. They missed another opportunity. We can look through history and see lost opportunity of lost opportunity. And I think the Trump era was another one of those opportunities where those are labor people who are the most ardent Trump supporters, I think, in this moment.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that was another big takeaway from the rally. I mean, Trump is only as strong as his opposition is weak. Those people were walking into that rally because they are, fed up with a system that is screwing them in many ways, that are material daily life things. They're paying hundreds of dollars a month for healthcare that doesn't cover anything until you spend thousands of dollars. Rents are through the roof. It's becoming harder to own a home. Homes that used to cost, $150,000 or, $500,000, right? People were walking into that rally because they're done with all of that, right? And I think, if labor or a party figures out that, hey, we could present a labor left alternative, right, who is anti-establishment, there are clearly chips on the table for that kind of thing. And, if we don't get that together, I think you can expect people to continue walking into Trump rallies.
Well, I mean, you would argue that was Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, right. We got a lot of interesting answers on that too. We had one person who said he would rather vote for Bernie Sanders before he votes for somebody like a Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. These are people who want somebody who's anti-establishment. I think Bernie had to, fight both sides really. And we just don't have a scaled up alternative that can offer something to people who are clearly fed up with how things are.
See, that's interesting to me that that some of the Trump folks would go after Sanders, considering, when you think of the Trump people, they're anti-socialist, because, Democratic socialist, I wouldn't think would be overly palatable with the red hat on.
You'd be surprised, right? I will say this about the word, there's a lot of staying power in that word socialism, right? But that does fall along age lines. And, I get it. I mean, if you were in grade school, ducking and covering under a desk because the socialists might nuke you, you might have one opinion of that word.
But it wasn't really a socialist I was afraid of nuking me. It was a communist.
Yeah, there you go. Right? So, it all gets scrambled up there. But really, especially when you get into Gen X and millennials and younger than that, it's the scare factor with that word starts to drop off a lot. And I think that could really make politics interesting, the next time that there's a power scramble, because there's an appetite for a labor left kind of candidate.
Do you see anyone on the left, any of the Democratic voices? Do you see any Democrats making a play for that space? Because I see Republicans trying to pivot themselves to being the party of the working class. Now, they've got no policy wins to share. They've got no policies that they can go, hey, look what we did. But I see them trying to pivot. Do you see anyone on the left trying to do better?
Well, I think there's about a handful of people who are the names that we know that are trying to do that. But I think the better point to focus on is, at a time when there are so many new labor wins. I mean, who thought that we would have any union at any Amazon facility? I mean, we had a warehouse go, regardless of the flaws of that effort, an Amazon warehouse unionized. Why didn't we move the White House there? Why aren't we on every single picket line that's coming up to show, as a Democratic Party, this is where our priorities stand? Why aren't we in California, saying to McDonald's workers? I talked to McDonald's workers in line at the Trump rally. He said, I work very, very hard. I should be paid more. I'm looking at all these union wins out there and thinking, maybe this is for me. That's what we should be doing in California right now. Why aren't our younger candidates who clearly have their eyes on the presidency making a principal stand with McDonald's workers right now? I mean, there's no shortage of opportunities for the Democratic Party, if they want to fix their working class problem, to start showing up on picket lines and making no bones about where they stand.
Let me see. Let me check the official watch. How long has it been since I've been calling for an Adopt a Striker program? Because look, this is not new. This is like, get out there and Obama, wear your comfortable shoes. Get out there and march with the working people. And this is where I think the party has had such a problem. Of being identified as the party of working people. And it's frustrating to me, because I like some of the policies. I like some of the things Biden has done to this point. I think, the manufacturing stuff, the chip stuff, the infrastructure, most certainly, even though I waited in traffic way too long today and over the weekend, but still moving in a good direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to address one of the pushbacks here, in all of the conversation that we're having right now. The video was a little bit successful, but some of the best critiques there are like, these things that Trump supporters are saying are surprising, but try that as a person of color in line. That's a good point. But I think, we shouldn't be burdening people of color with going out and rescuing the craziest white people at the Trump rallies, right? That's a job for somebody like me. And the other thing is that, people are looking for answers in this system that they feel is broken, and they're heading into political rallies. But we haven't really pushed out the idea broadly to the masses that there's another field that's not politics, and it's the workplace, right? If you want to get over a lot of these cultural divisions, there's no better way than to put people in this with big differences in the same boat, fighting for themselves against the CEOs, the bosses, especially at a really large company. Class solidarity, class unity, that requires people to understand differences and respect each other enough to stick together when people try to divide them, right? So, if we're trying to get over a lot of these cultural war issues, we got to throw people into the same boat and make sure they respect each other enough to fight and stick together and win things like UPS. And Trump voters are there. They're ready to go.
You're preaching to the choir on this one. I mean, I've been saying if you want to reunite the country, we got to reunionize. Because look, people in the same workplace may not agree on all issues, but they got one thing in common. They want to be able to feed their kids and keep a roof over their head. And that is a good place to start. And then you can build from there, which has been my premise for a lot of years. So, the question then becomes, how do we get to that point? And how do we change the laws to make it easier for people to organize and get contracts and make lives better? That's for me the push forward. So last question I've got, is there any hope for the Trump voters? I mean, I hear a lot of my friends on the left going, there's no hope for them, forget them. And even I've said there's some that are fives that you don't waste your time on. But is there any hope?
I think there is. A lot of people will say there's a small minority of them that can't be rescued. The rest of them we might reach out to. I don't think it's quite like that. There is it's cliche, right? But there's two sides that can be brought out in every single person, and we have had right-wing propaganda, billionaire funded, whose job it is to bring out the absolute worst in people. And the place that we're seeing that most often is these Trump rallies. Okay, but there's another side within people that can clearly be reached when you are talking class solidarity, when you are talking about materially improving their lives. And like we just talked about, when you throw people with big differences into the same boat with a common enemy, I think those people, that is the way to get them to kind of heal across a lot of these cultural divisions. So, we, all of us live in this kind of environment of engineered divisions. And I think, if you're listening to this and you're not on the side of Trump voters, when somebody goes out and produces one of these videos where it's just looking at the zoo animals and picking the craziest person and just, kind of dunking on the Trump voters, hey, you're participating in division of the working class, right? If you want a working class movement, it can't happen with just half the working class, has to be the whole thing. The conversations that we had up there, the willingness and the support for labor action, those are the things that give me hope. And you know what? If I'm not out of time, I want to close with one thing. I'm sitting in West Virginia right now. Labor history, class solidarity, that is our legacy. That's not often talked about in textbooks, but in the 1900s, when miners were joining the UMWA in West Virginia, they swore an oath to never discriminate against another worker on the basis of color, because you have to stick together. If you think you're going to win against the 1% and you're going to discriminate, it's not going to hold up very long. You had workers in the South in Kentucky with the Farm Equipment Workers Union. They were marching, they were electing black leadership. They were marching to integrate towns in the South 20 years before Dr. King marched on Washington. That is our history. It's possible to bring it back, and that's the hope that I have after conversations like this.
No, good stuff, John. I good on you for going. Good on you for the video. I hope folks will take a look at it. But I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon, because I too, I'm with you. I have hope that if we can reunionize, we can reunite. Good stuff, man.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for having me on, Rick. Always good to talk this.
You too, our good friend John Russell. Make sure you check out their website, theholler.co, if you want to check out the great work he does. Quick break, right back with your thoughts. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, I like John Russell's optimism. I really do. And I said that to him before the segment started. One of the things I love about you, John, is how optimistic you are. Because he does. He believes that everyone is reachable, I think. Now, I know some people that I don't think are reachable, but that doesn't mean you don't try. And again, one of the reasons we did our Working Class Heroes radio tour was to go out and talk to people, to get beyond the inch deep talking point. Because what you find is, people who just want to focus on here's the talking point, and then to the next talking point, and the next talking point, which is why when someone just comes in, they just blather about a bunch of and they have their list of grievances. I don't even pay attention to those because I'm never going to have time to address every grievance. How about we talk about something that you're not gonna be, so far gone on, and the workplace is that place. We've been saying this for years now. The way we bring people back together is by saying, look, your radical self-interest is involved in being part of this community. The idea that you're going to make better wages, you're going to have better health care, you're going to have better retirement security, that's a huge driver. And the reason that corporate America has done such a good job of dividing us and have spent so much money dividing us and tearing us apart is because they know that once we come back together, their profit margins go down, their CEO pay goes down, and it ends up like it was in the old days, where people made a decent, reasonable living. And our CEOs, not so much. Now, let me just finish up with this. You go back to this study done from 1978 until I think it was like 2019. You had the CEO pay go up, what was it, something like 940, almost 1,000% from 1978. The workers' pay just went up 12% over that same period. Let's quick get a thought in from what is it, Jack from Wisconsin. Jack, you got a thought quick? Okay, well, that's because that's not on.
I figured it right when he said divide and conquer. That's the way to destroy the working class, and he was pretty much right in Wisconsin. What your guest just said, excellent point. We've got to figure out a way to get these people back together again.
I appreciate the thought, Jack. Thanks so much, man. And I'm sure John will be thrilled to hear that. But no, I mean, he's spot on. The way we move forward, we come back together. Again, thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that workers' rights and women's rights activist and anarchist Emma Goldman gave a speech in New York City. Emma Goldman was born in what is today Lithuania. She came to New York in 1885, where she built a reputation as a powerful speaker. In New York, she addressed a crowd of between 3,000 and 4,000 unemployed workers in Union Square. The country was at the beginning of a depression that would sweep across the nation. Working families were finding it harder and harder to put food on the table. By the end of 1893, unemployment would soar to nearly 20%. Undercover agents at the rally reported that Emma had urged the crowd to take bread from the capitalists, quote, by force. Goldman recounted saying, quote, well then, demonstrate before the palaces of the rich, demand work. If they do not give you work, demand bread. If they deny you both, take bread. 10 days later, Emma was arrested in Philadelphia for her comments at the New York rally. She was sentenced to 1 year in prison. After she was released, Emma traveled to Vienna to study medicine. She returned to the United States to continue her lectures on workers and women's rights. She spoke out about the need for women to have access to contraception, an opinion that could arouse a backlash at the time. Emma was arrested multiple times for daring to speak out on controversial issues. In 1919, during the height of the Red Scare anti-communist hysteria, Emma Goldman was deported to the Soviet Union. Emma was a courageous defender of free speech, often called the most dangerous woman in America. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Today's train robbers don't need guns, for they are railroad executives wearing $3,000 suits and robbing us by railroading the political system. With their gangs of lobbyists and hopper cars of campaign cash, they get Congress to do their dirty work, gutting public safety protections and muting railway unions. Thus, rich investors get richer, while regular people are hit by an astonishing level of derailments, injuries, destruction, and death. Witness the horrific wreck of Norfolk Southern's nearly 2-mile-long toxic freight train this year in East Palestine, Ohio. This was a product of the industry's prevailing ethic of profit over public safety, and the American people were outraged by the greed, demanding fundamental reform. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg weighed in, correctly noting that calls to protect the public have too often, quote, given way to industry pushback and inaction. That must not happen this time, he emphatically declared. You go, Pete, but it is happening. A key reform he pushed was to allow rail employees to report safety dangers without fear of retribution from the corporate hierarchy. Such a close call reporting program has existed for years, but participation was voluntary. Hello, out of some 800 American railroad corporations, just 27 chose to volunteer, and all of the big 8 freight giants, including Norfolk Southern, refused to join. In the media glare of the East Palestine catastrophe, however, nearly all pledged to support the employee reporting reform. But that was then. Today, the media focus on East Palestine is gone, and the railroad lobbyists and their hopper cars of corporate cash have rolled back into Washington, watering down Buttigieg's safety agreement to nothing. This is Jim Hightower saying, and that's why America's train system won't run right until we fix the crooked political money system that derails progress.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So leave it to crazy Mike Lee, senator from Utah. Evidently, there's a new plot. There's a new scheme by the Biden administration. I guess COVID lockdowns are coming back. I think this is what I'm reading the report. Evidently Mike Lee spent the weekend, hyping up Alex Jones's conspiracy that Biden's preparing for another lockdown. COVID's coming. This guy's in the Senate. That's what I know. Tommy Tuberville's the dumbest guy in the Senate, but wow, there seem to be a lot of people vying for that title too. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. That's our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney, to come share some. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick.
So are we going to have another lockdown? Biden going to put us all in our homes again?
Well, let me ask you this: what was the court settlement against Jones? How much? Do you remember?
It was like $900 million or something outrageous.
Yeah, why don't we do Lee a favor and let's send that out to him if he wants to share information, misinformation. How about that?
Yeah, but as a senator, don't you have some protections of you can make up nonsense, or would you still?
Well, technically, if you do it on the floor, and like in my case, for example, the government went after something I said, and but it was said on the floor, so it can't even be presented in court. So if you say it on the floor,
okay.
But I don't think he didn't send it out on the floor. He sent it out as information.
Interesting.
And he said over his lifeless body, he said that this will happen. Okay?
Yeah. Well, maybe you could go to Florida.
Look, who knows these days? There, might be something pop up, a new pandemic. I don't know. We don't know.
Yeah,
but I surely wouldn't want to be doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Which is to induce panic before there's any, reasonable amount of information that says, "Oh, here we go again."
Yeah, but isn't that the point, to induce panic, to get the base all riled up in the panties, going, "Here they come again! They're coming for our freedoms!" And probably what this is, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to make an educated guess that somewhere someone is saying, "Hey, there might be a super bug down the road. Something might pop up. Maybe we should have a plan in place of maybe how we learn from past mistakes and we do things a little bit differently so that we can address. Maybe, possibly, is this somewhat reasonable thought? Maybe.
Well, that would be nice if we could give that gesture to Lee. It's not. He posted a died suddenly.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is a completely debunked anti-vaccine film.
Yeah.
From the same name that had that, and it was talking about unexplained deaths, and the film was produced by a far right media guy who also did a QAnon related film, all right, which was talking about vaccines containing synthetic snake venom. Should I go on?
No.
Should we just send this to Mike Lee? Let's do that.
We got to stop.
Okay.
No, there's other things that I got to get to.
Gotcha.
Because we've already spent too much time on craziness.
I thought once I got to the snake venom that'd do it.
You've lost me.
Yeah.
I got to get to the House Kook Caucus, the Freedom Caucus people. Are we heading for another shutdown?
I want to rename them the Caveman Caucus. How about that?
Yeah, okay.
I like that. Okay. Well, look, the biggest, and I praise them for this, the biggest, not the Freedom Caucus, when the Republicans took control, the one thing that they did that is good is to reestablish bill by bill of appropriations. We did 11, I think 13 is what they were talking about. That's a good process for anybody to use. So right. I thought, wow, this is great. That's responsible government. Now, that didn't happen. I think one bill made it. So they're going to do the punt by September, end of September. They're going to do the punt, which is to, do what they do, continuing resolutions, which they've done in the past. Now, this is what's weird. McCarthy should have done every single thing he could have done to have gotten those 13 appropriation bills through, because he could have had his fights at the point of the amendments and the bills, and it would have went over to the Senate. Then it was the Senate's problem. Instead, the whole ball of wax is the House's problem. So today, the House Freedom Caucus, drew their red line. And, there's now, 3 dozen of them, or, 25 or so. And what they said is they're going to oppose any short-term stopgap unless leadership meets their demands. So now what they've done is not only to not do the appropriation bills, Now they're going against stopgap unless their demands are met. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to do 13 appropriation bills by these demands in, one resolution that is a short-term funding cap.
Right.
Is what they're doing.
But ultimately, in this, and to be quite frank, this is more. I don't think it's as much about funding as it is their political, their want list, their wish list. They want, they want the Secure Borders Act of 23 to cease, to shut off our borders. They want to address the weaponization of justice, the Justice Department, the FBI, to go after real criminals instead of them. And they, according to them, want to end the left's cancerous woke policies in the Pentagon, undermining our core warfighting mission. That's really what this is about. I don't buy they care about spending. I think they want a recession. I think they want Biden to look bad. And oh, by the way, they want to use these buzzword things to get their base all riled up. That's what it seems to me as an outsider. I'm curious if you agree.
Oh, this isn't about spending. Again, there should have been 13 appropriation bills. Now, here's the big mistake of Speaker McCarthy. Rick, let's say, for example, that he brought forth all 13 bills, right?
Right.
And let's say of the supposed 36 members, I count more hardcore 20 that would go together on a vote. Let's make it 23. So let's say McCarthy brings up spending bills one at a time, which he did the one bill. And they do the sexy, spicy amendments. Freedom Caucus doesn't like it, but they do some. And all of a sudden, you've got centrist Democrats sitting there, as when I was in Congress, saying, okay, I'm going to vote for that bill. So it's a reaching across the aisle. Maybe you don't get 60 or 70 Democrats, but maybe you get 20. Maybe he picks up some of the Freedom Caucus and he passes, maybe agonizingly, but he passes each bill. Now he's sitting here as a hostage, and you're 100% right. This is not a hostage to spending. If you look at what they want policy all to be put into a temporary measure.
Yeah.
A temporary measure, if you're going to do such a thing, which I think is appalling that they're doing it, if you're going to do a temporary measure, you don't rewrite law in temporary measure. You take what you did, we've historically done that, and you add a few things. Yeah, people will put some riders in. They're trying to do their whole philosophy and point of view and what makes their base get excited in one piece of legislation that's a temporary piece of legislation. It's not about spending.
No, it's about holding the country hostage, as it's always been, as it's been for years now. There's nothing new in this, because again, they never come out with any way to really address the situation, and we just keep kicking this can down the road. I wish we could spend all day wishing and hoping with this kind of insanity would end, because it's not good for us.
They were supposed to do that. McCarthy repeatedly said that he will not. He said this. He's all right. He said, I will not take up what he calls it omnibus. I call it a continuing resolution. He said, I will not take up an omnibus spending package. He's going to do all 12 they had. I thought it was 13. They've got 12, and they're going to roll them into one big piece of legislation, which is okay.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And then the Senate does that. And that's not what they did at all. And so he put himself, at risk with his caucus holding him hostage. Now he's got to definitely not acquiesce to what they want. And the reason he can't acquiesce to what they want, because he can't pass a spending bill, because he's going to lose Republicans if everything they want is in that bill. So he's got to do a temporary bill that gets Democrat votes. Has to.
Yeah, and there's a short period of time to do this. So any chance we're looking at a shutdown, or does this get done?
I don't think they will. I think in the end McCarthy will do a clean omnibus or clean, continuing resolution that will appeal to Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic caucus, at least some of them,
right,
to do it just like they've done in the past with the Republicans, a temporary spending measure. But if he loads that up, he may have trouble even getting votes out of his own caucus.
Well, let's see how this plays out. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political analyst. I got to get your thoughts on the big story, the $200,000 bond, Trump in Georgia. This is kind of a big deal, isn't it?
Well, you think he's going to have to sell some Mar-a-Lago furniture?
Or maybe some ashtrays he took from the White House?
He can borrow some money from Mohammed bin Salman.
Oh, that stings.
With the golf, courses and everything.
The LVI or LIV or whatever it is.
MBS. He likes. I call him Mr. Bonesaw. And Mohammed bin Salman. Obviously, I'm not going to get a visa to Saudi Arabia after this is on.
Nor should you want one.
No, correct. But just in case, I'm not going to get one. But a $200,000 bond. I mean, he's putting a bond out. I don't know. I kind of even thought maybe it would be higher. But then again, if the judge went too high, I don't know. $200K.
Yeah. Is it a big deal?
I don't think so, because he's not going to go anywhere. He can't. If he left, all of his assets would be frozen if he left the country. So he's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Because I had some people tell me it was punitive. They shouldn't have done it.
No, it's nothing.
All right. Finally, I got to get your thoughts on, because someone had also asked me if it starts turning south, does he make a quick trip to Russia? And I'm like, no, I don't ever see that. But I did see that the U.S. Embassy in Belarus is telling all of their citizens, all the U.S. citizens, to gather the sheep and get the flock out, because things could turn south quick there, I guess.
Well, sure. I mean, I think at any point in time, it can go in a bad direction. There's absolutely no question about that. Any point in time it could. The U.S. citizens, and they've actually told not only the embassy, but they've told U.S. citizens to depart immediately and depart across the borders into, I think it's Lithuania, or go by plane.
Yeah, Latvia and Poland is where they're saying, get to those places quick.
And see, they won't allow U.S. citizens to enter Poland over land from Belarus, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh. The U.S. citizens are not permitted to enter Poland over land from Belarus. So what they've got to do, they've got to take a plane to somewhere, and they have warned them that the remaining border crossings should be done with Lithuania, Latvia, or by plane, and they can't actually enter Poland over land. I don't know what happens to them if they do, but they can't. So the U.S. Embassy in Minsk is saying, hey, you better get out now.
Yeah. I even had a friend tell me that we still got Americans in Russia, and I'm going, why?
Right. Oh, and Lithuania is shutting the border down, by the way.
Right.
On top of everything. Yeah, there are people in Russia. Well, I mean, we have Americans that are in Iran. People go there. I mean, there's all kinds of Americans in Russia.
All righty. Well,
I'd be very careful if I was an American in Russia.
Don't walk through any open windows.
Right.
Wow. But Bob, I appreciate the time. Great stuff as always.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Seriously, I have no idea why you would be in those places at this period. Let's quick go to the phones. We've got Justin on line 2. Justin, how are you?
Hey, I'm all right. Thanks for taking my call.
Anytime. What's on your mind?
I guess I just kind of got a question, kind of like a history type question. Like nowadays, we have this, everybody's going through this struggle right now. Not everybody's making a whole lot of money. People are working a lot of hours. And I know that history repeats itself. So this has happened in the past. I was just wondering if the population, because like a lot of people are not having kids, because they're not making enough money. They can't afford a house. They can't afford this. They can't afford that. Why would they want to have kids? Why would they even want to date? I mean, it's a big thing on YouTube, a lot of these dating things and people not having kids. But I was just kind of wondering if in the past, I mean, I know that, a lot of immigrants show up to, so it's not like the population's going completely all the way down, but I was just kind of wondering in the past if there was something similar that like people stop, having children and stuff. Just wondering.
No, that has happened, and as you've said, here in this country, when that happened, we filled those voids with immigrant labor and through massive waves. I mean, there are a number of times throughout the history that's happened. So, the thought is we're going to be able to fill our borders, or fill our country with lower age workers. It's just that right now we're talking about putting up borders so no one can get in. That's the weird part, and we're not really in the upside down problem yet that China is in. I don't think. I know a lot of people are saying,
Yeah,
Musk's saying everyone should have, 5 or 6 kids. I don't know how we're going to support that, but yeah, it's an interesting question. It's something I should look into a little bit more.
Yeah, okay. All right, yeah, I know, because I was watching things on other countries too, like Japan is having a serious problem, and Korea. But yeah, thank you for taking my call, and have a good one.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it, Justin. No, I mean, I've seen some of this stuff as well, where, look, you have an older population who's going to take care of them, and fortunately, we've got a very large, millennial Gen Z population coming up behind. As the boomers are dying off, things will, hopefully level out a little bit. But I think our problems are much bigger than even age demographics at this point. I think a big part of our problem is it's wealth inequality. It's the fact that what we have has been divvied up so unequally that so few have so much. And I know that sounds, you sound like a socialist. No, that's not the point. If you're going to have a competitive capitalist system, the idea of capitalism is to be able to to abstain. A free market is all about being able to participate or not. And once you have to work, and you have to work for poverty wages, things don't get better until you organize. That's simple. And I fear we're in one of those ruts right now, and I get the feeling we're swinging up. But interesting question, something I'm going to spend a little more time looking into. I'm going to take a quick break, right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1831. That was the year Nate Turner led a slave rebellion in Southampton, Virginia. From a young age, Turner believed he had a purpose ordained by God. Turner had learned to read from one of his master's sons. He had also learned a deep hatred of slavery from his mother. He came to be regarded as a spiritual leader, or a prophet, by many of the nearby enslaved people. In February of 1831, there was a solar eclipse. Turner took it as a sign that it was time to lead a revolt. He began to make plans. Then, along with 7 other enslaved people, he killed the entire family that owned his plantation. The group made their way from plantation to plantation, killing 51 whites in all. Their plan was to raid the town of Jerusalem. But before they could reach the town, they were met by a militia of 3,000. The small band of between 60 and 75 insurrectionists were no match for the militia. More than 50 slaves were executed. Many more were beaten. Some were from as far away as neighboring North Carolina and had nothing to do with the uprising. White hysteria swept the South. More repressive slave codes were passed in many states. Harsher restrictions were enacted against enslaved people for preaching, being educated, and assembling in large groups. That year, Virginia, Maryland, and Florida all passed laws restricting even freed black men from carrying a gun. Nate Turner escaped the militia into the Dismal Swamp. He stayed there for 6 weeks before he was discovered. He was tried, convicted, and hung. Many historians credit Turner's rebellion and the harsh repression that followed in hastening the coming Civil War and the end of the slave labor system. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. Email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. I want to finish up today with an email from Terry that grabbed my attention. I've got a bunch of emails today I've been flipping through, but this one got my attention. Said, "Hi, Rick, thanks for having Jessica on. She's just like one of my best friends, served in the military for 25 years in Germany, led a sheltered life, and wouldn't listen to me about what was happening here. When my friend retired, she couldn't believe how much the U.S. has changed. She's currently lamenting being part of the military-industrial complex. Like you, Rick, I'm a Gen Xer. I followed my dad into General Motors. I believed as you did. Work hard, save your money, get promoted, retire with a great pension. I watched all the outsourcing and turning of pensions into 401ks. I was downsized one too many times and left automotive for consulting, then solar. I have no pension like my parents have. I don't have all the answers, but I agree with you about corruption. It chaps my behind to see what leading Republicans and several Supreme Court justices are doing. She says, I want term limits. George Washington believed them. I think she was talking about for the Supreme Court. Mostly, I want to get rid of Citizens United and make campaign contributions totally transparent for starters. The founders never envisioned career politicians or two-party systems. Maybe she was talking about term limits in general. They did anticipate Teflon Don, so we have to stick to the Constitution and make him accountable for being the narcissistic twit that he is and all his co-conspirators. Meanwhile, I'm doing everything I can do to educate the younger people I work with about history, fair labor practices, and politics, while showing them that not all of us older folks are climate-denying rich buttheads. Okay, yeah, I'm going there with you, Terry. As I said, I'm not in favor of mandatory term limits for the reason that I think we have the ultimate term limiter, and that's our ability to vote. My problem with term limits is at the end of the term, you get the other effect. You get people who are going to vote for something going out the door to enrich themselves in their next position. We saw that in Michigan when Michigan passed right to work. That for me was the moment I said, I'm not on the term limit bandwagon because I want someone to be responsible for me for votes that they take. What are you going to do to somebody as they're voting on the way out the door? They got nothing to stand for. So that's my problem with term limits for electorally. Now, sadly, you're right. There are some people who, and the reason that I reached out to Jessica was plain and simple. I wanted to know why now this epiphany. And now it makes a lot more sense. Because families have been struggling for a very long time. And when you listened to her say what the solutions are, it's interesting to hear that, talking about old school kind of FDR New Deal Democratic ideals. Every problem there is out there we can solve with sound policy and smart investment. We can. The housing crisis. There aren't enough houses. Well, we could say we're gonna encourage the building of more homes, and you can do as they did back in the 50s. With public money, went to private contractors and they built entire communities. My grandparents lived in one. It was that whole community was built up in a couple of years of little brick bungalows. I'll get it out, and affordably priced, well built, and the reality is came with a small profit margin, but a profit margin for the contractor, not an absorbent, not an incredibly huge one, but they made money. But what they did is they built for the good of society, and to be honest, housing prices were made reasonable by increasing the flow. Now she was spot on when she said, look, the reality, reason rents are so high, big money people buying them up. The fact that she went to foreign investors and hedge funds, good on her, man, because that's the reason our rents are so high. When Alex Rodriguez the former baseball player, goes on a TikTok or whatever the social media platform and says, I'm going to have 150,000 doorknobs. One guy is going to own 150,000 addresses that he's going to rent out to people so that he can make money every month off of people's rent. You don't think that's a problem? And that's what's been allowed to happen in this country for far too long because, again, we've been fighting each other over stupid stuff. It's time to stop. It's time to stop. So I hope today, talking with Jessica and John, hope that maybe gave us some ideas. But I want to hear yours. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you think there's a way for us to move forward, to get ahead, to reunite, reorganize our economy and our country, I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.